A wealthy and successful lawyer finds herself in deep trouble after she gets into a forbidden affair with her stepson. One morning, Anne goes home to change into her work clothes when she sees her husband Pierre hurriedly packing up. With her presence, Pierre quickly informs her that his ex-wife Rebecca has called him about their son Theo, who received a 2-day suspension after getting into an argument with his math teacher. Because of this, Pierre has to leave for Geneva to fetch Theo since he wants his son to move in with him. During the initial days of Theo's stay, Anne is annoyed at his sloppiness and laziness as he often leaves the house messy. But despite this, Anne observes that Theo has a good relationship with his stepsisters Angela and Serena. This is evident when the two girls excitedly give Theo a gift, a handmade keychain. In gratitude, Theo compliments it and hugs the two. The following day, Anne goes home from work when she notices the keychain on the driveway. She stalls for a bit, confused about why it's there, but she still puts it in her bag. Once inside her daughter's room, she's delighted to see how Theo's not shy in showing affection toward the children, and even complies with their wishes as they bond. However, when he notices Anne's presence, Theo abruptly gets up and leaves the room. That night, Pierre arrives home from work exhausted and infuriated. As he eats his dinner, he releases his frustration by sharing his troubles at work. Anne diligently listens to her husband, but she entices him to make love to improve his night. Inside the couple's room, Pierre slowly disrobes himself, but as he does so, he shares his doubts and insecurities. He tells Anne that he's bothered by Theo's previous remarks to him, which emphasize his aging self. According to Theo, Pierre adopted Angela and Serena to ease his conscience for being an absent father to him. Furthermore, with Pierre's age, Theo thinks he could be the girl's grandfather. Though Pierre thinks Theo is mean, Anne thinks otherwise. She opines that since Theo is good with the children, it's one of his redeeming qualities. Upon hearing this, Pierre becomes silent but initiates becoming intimate with Anne. After the deed, Pierre feels vulnerable about his age, so he seeks reassurance from Anne. To appease him, Anne reminds him that she's attracted to older men as she thinks they're more desirable. With her words, Pierre smiles in relief. The next day, Pierre visits Theo's room and softly reprimands him not to smoke indoors. Unenthusiastically, Theo obeys, but Pierre proceeds to enter his room to have a serious conversation with him. Pierre reminds him of the hospitality they've provided him. Therefore, he hopes that Theo will reciprocate their gesture. Half-heartedly, Theo tells him he will and requests his father to leave him as he's busy on his phone. With his attitude, Pierre asks him what he's busy with, and Theo replies that he's working. Since Pierre is skeptical, he further inquires about his work, but Theo evades his question. Because of this, Pierre expresses his doubt about his work and confronts him for being a freeloader. Pierre's word reaches Theo, but he remains uninterested in addressing his parasitic lifestyle. Therefore, Pierre tries to take away his phone, leading Theo to lash out at him. Hurt by Theo's disrespect, Pierre returns his phone and leaves the room. Shortly after this, Anne and her friend Mimi arrive at the house and find it in complete disarray. Immediately, she contacts Pierre and informs him that their house was robbed. While she's on the phone, Theo nonchalantly appears and asks her about what happened. Anne supplies him with the necessary answers and quickly orders him to check for missing items in his room. Once Theo leaves, Mimi can't help but comment that she finds the boy kind. Anne tells her that Theo treats her like she doesn't exist, but she's fine about it for now. The following day, Anne delivers good news to her client Sarah and her father, Mr. Evrar. According to her, the court has allowed Sarah to be in his custody. In gratitude, the man tries to shake Anne's hand but accidentally knocks over her cup of coffee, soaking the papers and skirt. Mr. Evrar becomes apologetic, but Anne assures him it's alright. After wiping off the liquid, Anne resumes disclosing the news and reminds them not to waste the chance the court has granted them. Later that day, Anne changes out of her soiled clothes when she discovers the keychain on Theo's pants. She's confused to see it as she has kept it in her bag and has yet to return it to him. Moreover, her bag went missing after the house burglary, which makes her even more suspicious. Due to this, Anne confronts him, but Theo acts nonchalantly. Left with no choice, Anne becomes frank with him and interrogates him about how the keychain ended up in his pocket. Instead of answering, Theo expresses his displeasure for Anne's snooping. Regardless of that, Anne is keen on getting an answer from him, so she continues to press him for an explanation. Theo remains stubborn and doesn't show any remorse about the burglary that happened in their residence. Therefore, Anne threatens him that she'll tell Pierre about his behavior, but Theo doesn't care. He even challenges her to call the police on him. Sensing that Theo will not relent, Anne bargains with him by saying that she won't inform Pierre about Theo's actions, but in exchange, he has to integrate himself with the family. Then, Anne will observe if he'll fulfill his part. Just after their negotiation, humiliation, Teo begins to come out of his shell and breaks his reserved personality. Upon seeing Anne struggle to grab her daughter's swimming gear, Teo quickly helps her, earning his stepmother's gratitude. He asks her what the gear's for, and Anne answers she'll go swimming with her children. Now that she's mentioned it, Anne invites him to accompany them, and he gladly accepts. During their outing, Teo notices that Anne has yet to join them in the river, so he invites her. Anne refuses.
What if there was a way to know if a stock will be bullish or bearish the day before? The truth is,
Anne refuses, telling him that she's still not in the mood. Playfully, Teo reiterates her words about integrating into the family, earning a smile from her. Before he can further invite her, the girls order Teo to return to the water, which he quickly complies. Not wanting to miss the fun they're having, Anne quickly gets up and decides to join them. The following day, Anne hangs out with Teo on the patio, and she begins a conversation with him by asking if he misses Genova. Teo tells her he doesn't, as he hates the place and the people there. To make him more comfortable, Anne encourages him to bring his friends into the house, but Teo answers that he doesn't have any. Anne shares that neither does she, causing them to share a laugh. Moving on, Anne notices Teo's tattoo on his forearm and asks him where he's gotten it. He proudly tells her he's tattooed himself and offers to give her one. However, Anne refuses as she's afraid of the possible pain. Suddenly, Teo grabs her arm and touches the part where he plans to put the tattoo. When Anne continues to refuse, Teo teasingly inches his touch near the bend of her elbows. Anne quickly takes her arm away, but Teo tells her a tattoo at the said spot will be classy. After persistently offering to tattoo her, Anne finally relents, and Teo begins their session. Despite the pain, Anne finds herself having fun in Teo's company. One night while Anne's busy with work, she hears Teo's voice alongside a feminine one. The two come across her, so Teo introduces Amanda to her. Once the greetings are exchanged, Teo quickly brings Amanda to his room, leaving Anne uneasy. A few days later, Anne ditches the gathering with her guests as she finds it boring. As she lounges at the stairs, she sees Teo preparing to buy a pack of cigarettes. Teo invites her to accompany him and she agrees. Moments later, the two head to a bar and share a drink. Fueled with alcohol, Anne can't help but bring up Amanda in their conversation. She asks him if the girl's his girlfriend, but Teo denies it. For him, Amanda's just a conquest, and they've agreed to such a relationship. Now curious, Teo asks Anne if her relationship with his father is true love. Instead of answering, Anne reveals that when she was young, she felt nauseous whenever her mother shared stories of her escapades with men. This leads Teo to ask if her mother has plenty of men, and Anne confirms. This time, Teo shifts the topic to her, asking if she's also been involved with numerous men. However, Anne evades the question and downs her drink. Teo suddenly receives a text, so he informs her that he has to leave. Curious, Anne inquires if Amanda sent him the text, but Teo playfully evades her question. Shortly after, Anne returns home in a chipper mood, whereas Pierre is worried sick about her. Pierre asks her where she's been, but Anne lies about going for a walk. This disappoints Pierre, especially since they have a company to entertain earlier. He adds that he finds her sudden disappearance disrespectful to their guests, so he chastises her to behave normally. Despite his words, Anne remains unaffected, and instead, she voices out that everything in their gathering is boring. Therefore, she hopes Pierre won't turn into one as she thinks it doesn't suit him. The following evening, Teo watches a television series on his phone when Anne visits his room. Due to this, he invites her to watch the series with him, which the woman gladly accepts. While they're watching, tension rises between them, so Teo initiates kissing Anne, leading them to make love. Once her afterglow fades, Anne's conscience haunts her. Therefore, she orders Teo to forget what happened and never do it again. However, Teo doesn't assure her as he asks her if she's enjoyed the deed. Though against her better judgment, Anne affirms but expresses her regret. Teo calms her down and even playfully teases her, but Anne remains unamused. As a result, Teo tells her she's irritating, causing her to leave his room. The next few days after their intimacy, Teo hangs out with his stepsisters in their backyard. Afterward, he approaches Anne, who's lounging in the sun, and offers her a beer. When Anne accepts it, Teo drops beside her and interviews her using a dictaphone. At first, Teo's questions start innocently, leaning on getting to know her better. But as the interview progresses, Teo begins to ask Anne a suggestive question. He presses her on who was her first time, but Anne feels uncomfortable with it, so she refuses to answer. Because of this, Teo wonders why she can't answer his question. Therefore, Anne frankly tells him some things shouldn't have happened. Now bothered, Teo asks if she's pertaining to their relationship, but Anne makes him feel disappointed as she denies what's happened between them. Still, Teo stubbornly believes they're in a relationship, and he kisses her once again, about her first time, but Anne still refuses. With her reaction, Teo kisses her as an apology. The following day, Anne visits Sarah as she's been unreachable for the past few days. She expresses her worry to her, but the girl acts differently, rousing Anne's suspicions. Suddenly, they hear her father's voice from Sarah's house, and Anne notices that her demeanor changes. Therefore, Anne invites Sarah to walk outside, hoping it'll make the girl open up to her. However, Sarah refuses and tells her to leave. Once outside, Anne contacts the Child Protection Service and requests for Sarah's case file. On Serena's birthday, Teo helps Anne prepare the tables when he becomes touchy with her. Since he's showing her affection in front of her daughters, Anne breaks free from him and chastises his behavior. During the party, Serena approaches Anne and requests her to fill her water gun. Immediately, Anne complies and she heads to her shed.
What kind of what movie is this?
Teo creeps
Y'all
up
let me know down
behind her
below.
and
What
hugs
movie
her
is this?
despite the woman's protest. Still, Teo's persistent, making Anne lose focus and eventually give in. Unbeknownst to them, Mimi's outside and she's witnessed their affair.
Please. Please, Lord Zux. Bring me more customers and a higher ROAS.
In disappointment, Mimi walks out, but Anne tries to stop her. Regardless of her words, Mimi is determined to leave. The following day, Teo meets Anne in their garden where he receives an earful from the woman due to his behavior yesterday. Then, she reminds him to keep it a secret to protect their family's reputation. Though crestfallen, Teo gives his promise to Anne, much to her relief. Afterward, Teo asks her if she's dumping him, and she confirms. For her, their affair must end, especially since he has his life ahead of him. Realizing their affair will end, Teo requests Anne for a goodbye kiss. The woman grants his wish, and after a moment, Teo bids her farewell. While heading to the house, he suddenly shouts at Anne, still resenting their separation. He declares that she'll be envious of all his girlfriends, and there she'll realize that he doesn't need her anymore. The next morning, Anne joins Pierre for breakfast when the man informs her he's taken a week off to bond with Teo. This rattles Anne as she's afraid Pierre might discover their affair. Still, Anne plays it cool and agrees it might be a good idea to mend their relationship. While the two are talking, Teo watches them through the window. Later that evening, Anne snoops into Teo's nightstand and grabs his dictaphone. She tries to find the tape that contains their conversation about their affair, hoping to get rid of it. Once she finds the tape, she quickly takes it and leaves. The next day, Anne drops off her daughters to their horseback riding activity agitated. Afterward, she drives home, but her phone rings, so she tries to find her phone. This causes her to get distracted and accidentally crash her car. Due to this, Anne has no choice but to go home with her daughters using a cab. The three are surprised that Pierre's car is already in the driveway. Immediately, Anne's daughters rush to their father, and they tell him about their mother's accident. Despite the information about the accident, Pierre isn't worried about it. After some time, Anne serves her family dinner, but she wonders about Teo's whereabouts. Pierre informs her that Teo won't join them, causing Anne to assume he's with Amanda. When he hears her answer, Pierre confirms that Teo's indeed with her, but he gives Anne a pointed look. During the meal, Pierre shares that they encountered mice on their trip. However, Pierre's story is not typical, as it hints at Anne's infidelity. According to him, mice are trouble as they keep on reproducing, hence they must be taken care of. Upon hearing this, Anne becomes quiet, catching Pierre's attention. He asks why she's not eating, so Anne answers she has no appetite. By evening, Pierre initiates a conversation with Anne, revealing that Teo has confessed to their affair. Anne remains quiet, but when Pierre provokes her into telling her side, she tries to save her face. Instead of telling the truth, Anne calls Teo miserable and frames him as a liar. Now troubled, Pierre admits that at first he doesn't know what to believe, but with Teo's story, he wonders why he'd tell something like that if it isn't true. Anne reasons that Teo fabricated the story for attention, and it's unusual for her to get involved with him since he's a teen. Regardless of her alibis, Pierre doesn't believe her as Teo's actually told the affair in great detail. Angered, Anne walks out, but she begins to rub in Pierre's face all of the effort she's exerted just to make Teo feel comfortable in their family. When she reaches their room, Anne quickly grabs a bag and proceeds to pack her things. Pierre becomes more unsettled, so he tries to stop her. However, Anne doesn't listen, and instead, she guilt trips him into thinking that Teo disclosed their supposed affair to him as payback for abandoning him.
No, bro, not gaslighting.
And expresses
not
that he
flipping
feels
the
troubled
script.
About who to believe.
Not
Taking
reverse
the chance,
psychology.
Anne says his son is a monster and deems him the culprit for
Sis, you slept with the son. Stop trying to do that.
Sympathy by saying that she didn't tell him about Teo's deviance because she wants to give him a second chance and prevent hurting their relationship. Before ending her thoughts, she tells him that Teo's doing all this so that Pierre will reject Anne and he can finally have his father back. Furthermore, she calls Pierre naive for being manipulated easily. Now, Pierre is afraid of losing his wife. Therefore, he tearfully hugs and kisses her. The next morning, Pierre summons Theo into their living room, and he reprimands him for accusing Anne of having an affair with him. Feeling betrayed, Theo stalls and looks at Anne, who looks remorseless. Then, he tells his father that he didn't lie and urges Anne to tell their story herself. However, Pierre orders him to apologize to his wife. Confidently, Anne tells Pierre not to worry for her, and she proceeds to scold Theo as if he's a troubled child who only seeks attention.
Wow.
This hurts Theo, causing him to call the two crazy. Once again, Pierre orders him to admit that he lied, unaware of how much this breaks Theo's heart. Anne approaches Theo and gently urges him to admit that he's lied, a farce that makes her look like a saint. Instead of complying, Theo abruptly leaves. Moments later, Theo's packed and ready to leave, but his sisters don't want him to. Since everything's out of his control, Theo tightly hugs them as a farewell. Inside Anne's workplace, her coworker alerts her about Theo's presence. She summons him to her office, and they talk about the event earlier. Theo threatens to press charges against Anne if she doesn't tell Pierre the truth. Despite his threats, Anne doesn't comply as she's confident that their condition doesn't necessarily equate to a crime. Moreover, she believes that no one will believe Theo as he has no proof of their affair. Therefore, she suggests he just tell Pierre that he lied. Realizing that his effort will be fruitless, Theo leaves her office with a stomp on his feet. After a few days, Anne attends a meeting with Theo's lawyer, wherein the boy presses charges against her. Anne tries to appeal using her connections with the lawyer, but he doesn't relent. Left with no choice, Anne accepts the lawyer's proposal and gets up. Before she leaves, she bids a shaken Theo farewell. Later that evening, Anne hears a loud thudding noise downstairs, so she gets up to check on it. Once downstairs, she sees a drunk Theo persistently banging on the door. She asks him why he's in their residence, so Theo says he wants to see her. Confused, Anne reminds him they have a deal, but he refuses to acknowledge it. Fueled with desire, Theo kisses Anne, but she tries to push him away. Still, Theo's influence on her is too strong, so she eventually gives in to him. After their moment of intimacy, Anne returns to their room, and a sleepy Pierre asks her what the commotion's about. Anne lies that a drunk Theo visited them and she called a cab for him. Pierre notices she's cold, so Anne hugs him and buries her face on his neck. Then, she calls out Pierre's name, but her husband shushes her, urging her to go back to sleep.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like.
Bro, what movie is that? I low-key kind of watched this. Yo, that joke kind of crazy. Wait, hold on. What movie is that? I don't know. Y'all let me down below. Y'all let me know down below in the comments, because that's just... Anyways, I'm done.